Hey there everybody, welcome to Auto Bears, and this is the Honda Jazz EX Style. Now, it was 21 years ago that the first generation Jazz arrived on UK shores, and it was the answer to a question that some people were asking but no manufacturers were answering, which was, could we have a small family hatchback that could comfortably seat 4 adults, but if need be, turn into a bit of a minivan if I needed to carry large bulky items? And there voila, the Jazz was born. Now, as a result, it's always been a bit of a left field, quirky car of choice for buyers, and as a result as well, it was never really a threat to the established models like the Ford Fiesta and Volkswagen Polo. But I will mention those two models at the end of the review for good reason. Now, in its 4th generation, Honda are clearly sticking with its guns because, well, it still looks like a mini MPV and has that, quirky look to it. But now you can only get the Jazz with hybrid power. So I've had this Jazz for a week and I'm going to answer the question of, is it still the quirky left field choice for buyers, or has it broadened its appeal now that it's a hybrid only? Now, when it comes to the Jazz's styling, I actually think Honda have done a really good job with this 4th generation, considering the fact that it has that boxy mini MPV look. I mean, at the front it has got a cutesy, happy face to it, highlighted by those big headlights that look like big beaming eyes. But also I've got the EX Style here, which does come with some exterior styling add-ons, including those distinctive 2-tone alloy wheels, the 2-tone paint job as well for the bodywork and the roof, not to mention a couple of extra add-ons to the exterior. So it does give it a more dynamic look to it, though I wouldn't say it was a sporty looking car. But let me know what you think of the Jazz's exterior look in the comments section below. But you know what? On that note, I think it's time we have a little look at the inside of the Jazz. Sat in the front of the Honda Jazz, you are greeted by a very comfortable, nicely laid out and hugely spacious interior. It does feel like a much larger car when you sat up front in the Jazz. Now, getting in and out of the Jazz is actually really easy because the doors open nice and wide, and because of that high roofline and low door sill, it does actually mean getting in and out is a doddle. And also, if you do suffer from any kind of mobility issues, I do recommend having a look at the Jazz because it might be actually a bit more cost effective than going up to a crossover or SUV. However, if you are after a crossover or SUV, I recommend the Honda HR-V because that is also a very easy car to get in and out of. And then once you're sat in the driver's seat, you find that the seats themselves are very comfortable. They do hold a big bear like me in place, and also I do like the material for these seats. Now, there is a good amount of adjustment as well, albeit it is manual adjustment only, but there's no lumbar support, so that's just something to be aware of. But also with the steering wheel, you do have both rake and reach adjustment, so getting the perfect driving position is easy. And then when it comes to interior quality, just like the Crossstar, there's a nice mix of hard scratchy plastics, but also soft touch materials as well. Don't forget, with these kind of hybrid cars, most of the money that goes into them is into that hybrid battery technology. So what we have got up front in terms of what you're going to touch in the car is we have got some soft plastics here on top of the dash. Well, hard plastics on the far part of the dash, but here above the little glove box area, it is nice soft leather. We've also got a little bit of leather as well here on the door panels, as well as on the armrest and on the sides of the center console to rest your knee against when you're going on a long journey. So it's actually a nice mixture of hard and soft plastics, but it's not going to beat the likes of the Volkswagen Polo. Cubby spaces in the Jazz are actually pretty good in here. Now, we've got some reasonable sized door pockets where you can get a small, possibly to a medium-sized bottle of drink in there, but they're not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit. Now, on the center console, just in front of the gear lever, we have got a little flat surface area where you can rest your phone if you're going to connect up to Apple CarPlay. But the only thing is, it's not actually rubber lined, so your phone will slide from left to right as you're driving along. So for the facelifted version of the Jazz, I would love Honda to actually make that rubber line so your phone will stay in place. Then just behind there, we have got a couple of cup holders here. Well, I should say you've got one cup holder and a little extra bit of cubby space where you could put the key or something in there. But it is rubber lined and there's actually a decent depth to it, so you can put your coffee cup in there as well. Then behind there, we have got the armrest, which is of a decent size as well. It has got a little bit of fabric on the bottom, and yeah, it's actually pretty good for keeping a couple of items in there. Now, the quirky part of the Jazz dash is that we have got a small cubby space, or a little, so I'd say top glove box on top of the dash there, which is very cool. And then on the normal glove box, we have got it, which is a decent size, but the actual book pack does take up a bit of that space. But both of these extra spaces are not lined with any fabric, so loose items will rattle around a bit there. And then finally, we have got 2 extra cup holders on the edge of the dashboard there, perfect for putting your coffee cup in. And if anything, actually, you could turn the heating on and keep your coffee nice and warm whilst you're driving. But yeah, when it comes to the cubby spaces of the Jazz, it's actually pretty good in here with some quirky, unique features. Now, when it comes to physical buttons in the Jazz's cabin, there are a few of them, but they are really nicely laid out. Now, on the infotainment system, we've got a couple of shortcut buttons, a little rotary dial, and a couple of skip buttons as well. Then below there, we have got single zone climate control, and we've got 3 dials here and a couple of buttons, but it does feel really nicely damped, and actually it's very easy to use when on the move. Then behind the gear lever, we have got a couple of buttons here for the electric handbrake, auto hold, and the econ button as well. Now, on the steering wheel on the left-hand side are your media, driver data, and voice controls. On the right-hand side are your radar-guided cruise controls and your heated steering wheel button. And then we have got a couple of buttons here underneath the right-hand air vent, and they do your Honda Sense safety systems, your parking sensors, and turn off the traction control. So all in all, when it comes to the physical buttons here in the Jazz, there are a number of them, but they are nicely laid out, and again, they're very easy to use when on the move. Now, when it comes to the infotainment system, it is a 9-inch touchscreen display, and if you are used to Hondas over the last few years, you'll know it's never really a strong point with their cars, and it's no exception in the Jazz. Yes, the icons are nice and big and pretty easy to use when on the move, but it's not the quickest system out there, and other rivals do have more kind of clarity and clearness on the screen. But one thing I do like is that there is the kind of film over the screen, so if you are pressing the screen after a while, you don't get as many smudges and dirt marks on there than you would do on other cars out there. So that's just something I do like about it. Now, in front of the steering wheel, I will mention that we've got a 7-inch digital dashboard display, and although 7 inches doesn't sound very big compared to rivals, it's actually a really nice clear screen. Now, the clarity is really good. It's easy to go through the driver data menu whilst you're driving. The only thing I would say is on a couple of occasions you might find that there is a lot of information on display, but you will still soon get used to it, so just be aware of that. Now, I will also mention when it comes to connectivity with your phone device, we have got 2 USB charging inputs and a 12-volt socket, so that is really handy. And you also get things like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and also wireless CarPlay as well. So yes, sat in the front of the Honda Jazz is actually a really nice, comfortable and spacious place to be, and I could easily see myself doing a long journey in the Jazz. But on that note, I think that's enough of looking at the front of the Jazz. Let's see what it's like in the back. Sat in the back of the Jazz, it is actually very spacious back here, and you can see where those boxy proportions really do pay off. Now, that driver's seat is set to my driving position, and I'm 5'7" tall and 5'7" wide, and as you can see, I've got a really good amount of knee room, and headroom is pretty good as well. You should be able to get a couple of 6-footers sat in the back of the Jazz, and they should be able to be comfortable for a medium length journey, I'd say. Now, you could easily get 3 kids in the back of the Jazz, and speaking of kids, we've got ISOFIX supports on the outer seats, and there's no covers or anything. The bars are actually exposed to make it really easy to affix a child seat. And then when it comes to cubby spaces, it's pretty good back here as well. We've got some actual decent sized door pockets where you could get a small to medium sized bottle of drink in there. We have got your airplane style pockets on the backs of the front seats. However, we don't have a centre armrest with any additional cup holders, so that's a little bit disappointing. Now, when it comes to features, it's actually pretty good back here. Now, we've got a couple of USB charging inputs, which I really do like, but the main feature in the back of the Jazz are the magic seats. So underneath, there's actually nothing there. There's just a couple of bars to keep the seats in place, and it does mean that when you lift up the base, you can get large bulky items into the back of the Jazz. But just be aware, don't put anything under the seats if you plan to put the seats fully flat, because yeah, they're going to get squashed under there. And then we've got the windows, which are of a nice big square size. They allow a lot of light in, and they open about 95% of the way down. So it is enough for me to rest my arm on the edge of the windowsill there on a nice warm day. But all in all, it's actually very nice and spacious and comfortable in the back of the Jazz. And like I said, it is perfect for a couple of 6-footers back here for a nice journey. But that's enough of being sat in the back of the Jazz. Let's see what it's like in the boot. Opening the boot of the Honda Jazz presents you with 304 litres of space, which is kind of in the middle of the pack for this segment. It's more than the Ford Fiesta and actually one of the Jazz's key rivals, the Toyota Yaris, but a little bit smaller than the Skoda Fabia. But one thing I love is that when you've got the boot open, you're presented with a lovely wide square load area. Granted, it does get a little bit narrower towards the bottom of the boot lip, but the great thing I love with Hondas is that you do get a low boot lip as well. So when it comes to perhaps having a dog, it makes it easy for them to jump in. But also if you've got perhaps a wheelchair or a mobility scooter, it's easy to get it into the boot as well. Now this car I've got here is actually got a boot liner with it, but underneath we have got a couple of tethering hooks and a bit of additional storage space. However, what's a little bit disappointing is that you don't get a 12-volt socket, you don't get the ability to have a spare wheel, and also you can't get the parcel shelf under the boot floor either. So if you are going to load any large bulky items, you're going to need to leave that at home. Now, just like the Honda Civic, we have got this little ridge here leading to the further back of the boot area, which makes it a little bit awkward if you are going to load any large bulky items into the Jazz. Because one of the great things about the Jazz is that if you get the rear seats down, they go completely flat. So you actually do have that little minivan effect to it. It's just a shame that we've got that little ridge there to navigate over. But other than that, it's a very spacious and practical car, the Jazz, and I do love the wide opening to the boot area. It definitely has its key strengths there. And one thing I do love about the Jazz as well, and other Hondas at the same time, is that there is a little button here just where the handle is, where you can actually lock the Jazz if you've got the key in your pocket. But I haven't, I've actually still got it in the car. But anyway, on that note, I think it's now time we take this Jazz for a drive and see what it's like on the road. So once you get driving in the Jazz, first impressions are very positive. The first thing I would say is it's a very easy car to drive. Coupled with the comfort levels and the visibility, yeah, it's just a nice place to be. Now, speaking of visibility, just like the Crossstar, I've got a brilliant view of the road ahead, and I actually think that Honda have taken some design cues from the Jazz and put them in the new Honda Civic, because that's also a car with great forward visibility. It's helped by the fact that we got this massive dashboard and also this extended A-pillar, which means it does feel like a mini MPV. So that really does help with forward and front visibility. Even the main A-pillar isn't actually that thick. The wing mirrors are of a decent size, and I have got blind spot detection, so that is very handy. And also, if I look over my shoulder, I have got a reasonably thin C-pillar, but the blind spot monitoring does help. And then finally, rear visibility is really good as well. I got a nice large screen, and it's actually not obstructed by any of the rear seat headrests. So all in all, first impressions when you start driving the Jazz are really positive. It's just a nice, comfortable, easy car to drive. Now, there are 4 trim levels to choose from in the Jazz range, and I am excluding the Crossstar. Main reason being, at the time of recording, the Crossstar isn't actually on the Honda UK website. So going in regards to the regular Jazz, you've got the entry-level SE, you then have the SR, the EX, and then the top of the range EX style, which is what I've got here. Now, my pick of the range would actually be the EX, the one below this style, because you get everything spec for spec in terms of standard equipment, but you don't get the exterior add-ons that you do on this EX style. And they actually add up to around £2,800. And that's a lot for the alloy wheels, the two-tone paint job, and the extra add-ons to the exterior of the car. But in regards to kind of the standard equipment, go for the EX and you get everything that I've got here. And you got some real nice, luxuries like the climate control, you've got front and rear parking sensors, a reversing camera, Apple CarPlay, wireless CarPlay as well. So you are pretty much catered for in all departments, and if you want sat-nav, you also get the Garmin sat-nav with the EX as well. But if you are one of those where you are a little bit, self-conscious as to what people are going to think about the exterior of your car and your Jazz, then go for the EX style. It does look much better. But like I said, if you're not too concerned about that, then just go for the EX and save yourself a couple of grand. Now, when it comes to powering the Jazz, it's exactly the same as the Crossstar. You've got one engine available. It's a 1.5 litre petrol engine, and when mated to that battery and 2 electric motors, you got 96 brake horsepower. Now granted, yes, that doesn't sound like a huge amount. So 0 to 60 should take around 9.5 seconds, that's what Honda claim, but I'll be honest, it feels a bit quicker than that when you put your foot down. Now of course, this being a Honda and a hybrid, we have got an eCVT transmission, which does mean, yes, if I do put my foot down, you get an engine that starts roaring into life and actually ends up screaming into life as the revs go higher and higher. So this is definitely a car that wants to be driven in a lovely, relaxed and comfortable manner, and that's definitely the type of car the Jazz is. Now, in regards to economy, Honda say that on a combined WLTP cycle I should get around 61 miles per gallon, and I do believe them, because every journey I have done in the Jazz, I've gotten at least 55 mpg. Now on a long journey, I'm getting around 57, 58. On some shorter journeys, I'm definitely getting around about 63 and even 64 mpg on one occasion. So it is actually a great all-rounder. Now, this isn't a car that's kind of tailor-made for the motorways and long journeys. This is a car that's a great little urban cruiser, and that's where that hybrid setup really will benefit you. But yeah, I do believe Honda when they say about that 61 mpg. And actually, like I said, the gearbox is not too bad. As long as you drive in a nice, relaxed fashion, you'll have no issues whatsoever. But of course, you put your foot down, yeah, you're gonna hear the consequences of it. But yeah, in regards to the engine, that 1.5, it's a nice, sweet little engine, and it settles down very quickly once you get going. Now, of course, this being a hybrid, it's going to do everything it can to give you the best economy possible. But unlike something like a Toyota Yaris, you don't get a dedicated EV button. The car will do everything for you. Now, there are a couple of ways you can kind of get a little boost to your economy. Now, one of them is an Econ button here on the center console, and that does kind of rein the power in a little bit when you put your foot down. And I would recommend kind of driving a lot of the time with that button on, because those figures I gave you earlier were actually with the Econ button on. So I'm actually really impressed by that. And to be honest, even if you turn it off, you still get into the 50s, if not kind of, closer to the 60s when it comes to economy. But I wanted to get the best economy possible for you for this review. And also you have got the B function here on the gear lever, and that kind of puts a little bit of regen when you take your foot off the gas pedal. Now, it's not a huge amount of regen, it's not like you'd get in an EV, but you can feel it as you kind of take your foot off and the car starts to slow down. And yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the kind of hybrid side of the Jazz. And as I mentioned, you've got the battery and you've got 2 electric motors as well. But I am very impressed with the setup. It does work very well. And again, I'm very impressed with the economy I've gotten out of the Jazz. It is a very good little hybrid. So what's the ride and refinement like in the Jazz? Well, because this sits about 30mm lower than the Crossstar, it's going to be a little bit firmer than that version of the hatchback. Now I'm just going over a level crossing, and I've got my little humpback bridge here, going over it now. And it's actually very comfortable. It deals with the bumps and imperfections really well, particularly at speed. It does settle down and feel planted. Now, It does have a slightly firmer suspension setup because of the fact it's quite high riding, or has a high roofline, I should say. So Honda didn't want the suspension to be soft and wallowy, because you'll just feel like you're in a dinghy rocking about in the waves. So as a result, there's a slightly firm suspension setup, and you can feel that at low speed. Now, it's not uncomfortable, but you just feel some of the little bumps and imperfections of the road coming into the cabin, but the seats do take a big sting out of those little bumps and imperfections. However, if you go over a pothole or manhole cover, yeah, you're going to get a bit of a boom and a vibration and jolt coming into the cabin. So that's just something to be aware of. And it's another reason why I recommend going for the EX, because you get slightly smaller alloy wheels than you do on the EX style. So again, something to be aware of there. But in terms of the ride, in terms of everyday driving, you'll have no issues whatsoever. And actually, when it comes to refinement, that is a big plus as well. I mean, I'm driving along at 50 miles an hour, and the only real intrusion I've got coming into the cabin is a tiny bit of wind noise coming off the wing mirror and the A-pillar, and that's about it. As I said with the engine, if you do put your foot down, you are going to hear it, but it very quickly settles down, and I've got hardly any tyre roar coming into the cabin. Now I'm just going to accelerate to 60, and even at 60, it's really just the wind noise that I can hear. That's actually really impressive. So it does mean, though, in the Jazz, I said it wasn't a long range cruiser, but if you have to do a long journey, you should be very comfortable with it, and that is a big plus. So what's the Jazz's handling like? Well, as you can tell from the look of the Jazz and the fact you've got that high roofline, it's not going to be the best handling car in class. Leave that to the Ford Fiesta. But it handles pretty good. I mean, I'm not going to call it fun, and I'm not going to call it sporty, but it does everything that you want it to do. Now, firstly, the steering wheel feels really lovely in my hands. I really love the leather that Honda use. And when it comes to kind of chucking the Jazz in the corners, well, yes, there's a little bit of rocking and leaning there, but it's not too bad. I mean, again, we've got that firm suspension, or slightly firmer suspension, which actually kind of helps not have too much lean in the corners, as I'm going to demonstrate here. Turning in. Yeah, I'd say it's absolutely fine. Now, in regards to the steering, there's a little bit of weight in the wheel, so it doesn't feel like you're in a video game or completely detached from the car. And it's light enough that it does make parking a doddle, but not too over-assisted, again, so you feel like you've got no connection to it. But for everyday driving, you should have no issues with the Jazz. A little bit of roll there, and if anything, on a day like today where the heavens are soon going to open, I would predict that the Jazz would understeer in the corners if you were to push it, but it would feel predictable. I get that impression when driving the Jazz around corners like this. So yeah, the Jazz is not going to win any handling awards, but as a package, it does everything really well and does everything that you will want it to. Now, something I will mention is that there is only one driving mode with the car that you can select. So when you get into the car, it's essentially in normal, and the only driving mode you can select is the Econ one, which again shows truly what the Jazz is all about. And I actually really do like that about it. It's not making any excuses by taking away things like sport, because it knows it's not a sporty car. But yeah, as an overall package, when it comes to just driving the Jazz, it ticks a lot of the boxes because of the type of car the Jazz is. So what have been some of the highlights and some of the low points I've experienced living with the Jazz this week? Well, high points I think have been the comfort and visibility when driving the Jazz every day. And yeah, it's a very comfortable and nice place to be. I will be honest, I do like the exterior styling to this EX style. I do like all those little extras. But again, if you don't really care about that, like I said, go for the EX, because you still get all that standard kit, and it covers you when it comes to driving aids, comfort and safety. Now, speaking of driving aids, I have got one little quibble with the Jazz, and actually it's with a couple of other Hondas as well that I might have already mentioned. Now, on this car I've got radar guided cruise control, and it's absolutely brilliant and I really like it. I can turn the system on and kind of have it on standby and it doesn't go off, even if I turn the car off and come back later on. But I've got an auto hold here with the electric handbrake, and every single time I get into the Jazz I have to press that auto hold again. I'd rather keep that one than have to kind of keep the radar guided cruise control, because that's something I will be wanting to use every time I get into the Jazz, knowing that when I come to a traffic light or a complete stop, that the car's going to hold itself there and I'm not going to start crawling forward. Also, another thing that you might have heard as I was just talking there, now that was the lane keep assist. I'm actually on a road where there was no white lines on the road, so it was having a bit of a panic attack, and it's actually shut itself off. It's kind of told me that the lane keep is not active, so I have to reactivate it later on, or it will come on it by itself later on. So that's another little quibble I got with the safety systems and driver aids with the Jazz. And apart from that, no, I've been really impressed by it. I think it is a lovely, comfortable car. I think the looks have gotten much better now. They are trying to make the Jazz feel distinctive, and you get a lot of standard kit as well. Now, there is one more thing I am going to mention about the Jazz, and it's something about all Hondas as well, and it's this. Yeah, you get the weediest horn in a Honda, and I mean, you could have a Civic Type R and you could just be like flexing your muscles, and then all of a sudden it's like you can't lift up a 5-kilo dumbbell. You know, you can just look really menacing and you've got that weedy little horn to tell somebody to get out the way. That's something I really want to see Honda do, is just change the horns and get a dual horn in there rather than these single horns. But other than that, no, I've been very impressed with the Jazz, and I now think it's time we move on to the conclusion. So, what are my thoughts on the Honda Jazz? Well, as I said at the beginning of this review, the Jazz has always been the kind of quirky left field choice for a lot of motorists, and you can kind of tell the customer base it's aimed at. Now, I honestly think nothing has changed with this latest version. In fact, I think it's going to appeal to a wider range of customers because of that hybridization, and still with those quirky practicality little strengths it has. But the other thing as well is I predict that Honda might get a boost in sales next year of the Jazz, because two of its biggest rivals are going to get culled. Firstly, the Ford Fiesta. Now, Ford have announced in 2023 the Fiesta is going to be axed. It's going to just be stopped in its production, which I think is a massive shame, especially with the fact that Ford are not replacing it with a small EV family hatchback. I think they've missed a massive gap there in the market. And Volkswagen have also threatened to axe the Polo because, well, with Euro 7 regulations, it might not be able to kind of be financially viable to sell it. They've predicted around a £5,000 to £7,000 increase on the Polo car. And that is actually a massive step, you know, because that means you're going to have people having to be kind of forced to go into either a T-Cross or maybe a T-Roc, which might not have been the car that they were originally after. And that leaves cars like the Honda Jazz, the Toyota Yaris, the cars from Kia and Hyundai open to those customers. So I do think, especially with these kind of modern day times of people wanting to get into electrification and frugality and saving money, this could get a boost in sales next year because of the demise of a couple of its rivals. But going back to just the Jazz itself, I actually think it is a really good small family hatchback. It knows what its strengths are. It's very practical, it's very frugal, and you've got Honda dependability as well. Yeah, I mean, practicality wise, I think this is a brilliant car for those who are after what we call like a motability or a mobility customer. So you can get your wheelchair or your motor scooter or your electric scooter into the back of the Jazz. It just covers those little areas really well. So yeah, the Honda Jazz is still the quirky left field choice, but it should still appeal to an even broader audience now. So everyone, I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Honda Jazz. Of course, don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell notifications icon to let you know when I, Dave the Auto Bear, bring out a new video. Of course, if you've got any questions about the Jazz and my time with it, please put them down in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe and follow on social media as well. But in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful day, look after yourselves, and I will catch you all in the next video. So, take care everybody, and bye-bye.